Dragon Ball Z Kai, as I've often talked about, was a great idea in its foundation. It attempted something never really been done before in the world of anime, being a recut of a popular series that would trim down all of the filler and make a better paced show that advertised itself as a direct cut of the original manga, which of course was written by Akira Toriyama. Outside of anime recap films that summated entire arcs into 80 to 120 minute long blocks, nothing like this had ever been attempted before. Toei Animation had a brilliant idea on its hand, as it sought to revive the Dragon Ball anime branding to a new generation that might have only been familiar with it in its video game adaptations and reruns of Dragon Ball Z on TV. But sadly, the history of Kai is a convoluted mess, ranging from a music scandal that had the entire soundtrack to the first 98 episodes replaced, to aspect ratio and cropping issues, to the main focus of this video, 2 different versions. A brief summary of the circumstances that led to the 2 versions is this. Dragon Ball Z Kai ended its broadcast in 2011 in Japan, and in 2012 in North America. It didn't, however, adapt the final arc of the Dragon Ball manga, the Buu Arc. These 98 episodes ended at the defeat of Cell and the resolution of the future Trunks arc, and it would remain this way for about 3 years when the anime came back in 2014. It was something that had been rumored and speculated for some time then, as we knew it would come back, but we just didn't know when. I mean, after all, why would Toei create a brand new version of Dragon Ball Z only to abandon it before the story concluded? That wouldn't make any sense. So it was a sensed inevitability that it would return, and when Kai did come back, we were pretty excited. This was the adaptation of the Buu Arc, which, whether you love it or hate it, and it certainly gained its detractors in the years since, having it would mean we finally have the entire Dragon Ball story in Kai form, for those of us that wanted to revisit the anime in a new way. And then it started airing, and right off the bat something was wrong. It was to be aired and produced in widescreen only, a far cry from the first part of Kai's more faithful aspect ratio to the original source material. That certainly was a compromise, as many of us accepted that we would own a series with 2 different aspect ratios split between 2 halves of its run. Then we noticed that it had a green tint. Okay, so with the final chapters, Toei decided to do the remastering in-house instead of outsourcing to Q-Tech, who did the remastering of the visual quality in the first 98 episodes of Kai. That's problematic, but surely that's the last issue, right? And then we noticed that the pace was fast. Really fast. In episode 100, Videl had already found out that Gohan was the Great Saiyaman. That was 2 episodes into the Great Saiyaman sub-arc of the Majin Buu Arc. In episode 105, the episode where Goten and Trunks fight in the World Martial Arts Tournament, flew through the material so fast that it covered 3 episodes of Z in 1 episode of Kai. And then as episode 107 aired, we noticed something. This episode was slow. Really slow. It was so slow that it was comparable to the original Dragon Ball Z, with its filler intact. What happened here, I thought, and many of the Kanzenshuu forum members at the time inquired as well. It was almost like we were watching 2 different cuts of this recut of the Buu Arc. Well, shortly after, we found out the truth. There were actually 2 versions of Dragon Ball Z Kai, an international cut that was meant for countries outside of Japan, and a Japanese exclusive version of the series that only aired in Japan. After the success of Kai, Toei decided to sell more episodes in its recut of the Buu Arc. Whereas the first part of Dragon Ball Z Kai spent 98 episodes adapting 226 chapters of manga, its Kaiified version of the Buu Arc, which had 99 chapters total, would be adapted into 69 episodes. That's definitely a better pace compared to the original Z, which took 92 episodes to adapt the 99 chapters, but nowhere near the foundation set in the first part of Kai. The Japanese broadcast of the final chapters, on the other hand, had 61 episodes total, meaning that 8 episodes of this international version of Dragon Ball Z Kai, the final chapters, had been trimmed down for the Japanese broadcast, and that can be felt. It's definitely within the first couple of episodes of the Japanese version. This might be confusing for some of you, so here's a quick visual. The original Z version of the Buu Arc had 92 episodes, the international version of Kai had 69 episodes, and the Japanese version of Kai had 61 episodes. So what changes were there? The root of the problem is that 15 episodes of the final chapters became 8 episodes of this Japanese exclusive version. There's also a complete episode of filler that was skipped later on, which, you know, negates what the final chapters was supposed to be in the first place, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's disregard the original broadcasted Dragon Ball Z for now, and only talk about the final chapters and the differences between these 2 edits. First is that in Japan, the Buu Saga Kaiification isn't even called the final chapters. It's still only referred to as Dragon Ball Kai, not Dragon Ball Z Kai as it's known everywhere else outside of Japan. This was true for the first 98 episodes of Dragon Ball Z Kai as well, but internationally, the Buu Arc is referred to as the final chapters. Everywhere, from France to North America, the subtitle was added, largely so audiences could understand that this was the remainder of the Z storyline that had yet to have a Kai version. I'm personally not a big fan of the subtitle, but I do believe it's necessary to make things clear for audiences. The second change is that the opening and ending credits of these two versions are different. The international version uses an opening called Fight It Out, performed by Masatoshi Ono, and the Japanese version uses an opening called Kuzen Zetsu Go. This extends to the ending credits as well, as the international version uses an ending called Never Give Up, also in English, and the Japanese version has 5 different ending themes. Chala Head Chala is also used in the international version for the final episode, but it's the cover by Flow and not the original. There's also changes to the OST and the recaps. Both of them contain instrumental renditions of the openings. But since they have different openings, different music. A fun relic of the final chapters does exist in the Japanese version, however, as the eye catcher uses the same remixed jingle of Fight It Out that the international version uses. The third change and most substantial change of these two versions is that 15 episodes of the final chapters were trimmed down into 8 episodes of the Japanese cut. I've mentioned before that the final chapters, that being the international version, was produced before the Japanese version, and I told you guys that outside of Japan, the entire Kai version had 167 episodes to Japan's 159 total episodes. So what was changed? I want to show you guys a few comparisons between the two versions and see if you can tell the difference. I'll speed up the footage so hopefully my video doesn't get flagged, but let's look at the very first scene of both versions of the Buu Arc, what both versions consider episode 99. Did you catch that? The final chapters gets away with a quick recap of the last few moments of the Cell Saga before transitioning into the 7-year time skip. The international version has a 5-minute recap. I find the final chapters extended recap largely unnecessary, as I do think most audiences would be familiar with the story of Dragon Ball in some form, but I do concede that this may be my own bias and my own extended nostalgia with the franchise. It's also important to note that there was a lot of years in between the original Kai and the final chapters, even outside of Japan. In North America, we didn't get it until 2017, 3 years after Japan did. But that's a tangent. Let's take a look at another scene. In episode 101 of the Japanese version and 104 of the international version, take a look at the scene where Trunks spars with Vegeta. It goes by so much faster in the Japanese version, removing shots and trimming the footage wherever it can to make the pace that much faster. And these are just 2 examples. This is all over the Japanese version. Wherever it would cut out scene introductions, establishing shots, or the end of shots that dragged to make the episode much faster, and by extension, cover significantly more source material. This continues up until episode 113 of the international version and 106 of the Japanese version. Both of these episodes then line up, right as the cast is told by the Supreme Kai about Majin Buu, in a very long flight to Babidi's ship. Aside from these episodes, episode 157 of the final chapters is removed from the Japanese version. This episode is an entire filler episode, as it covers the post-Buu Arc filler, where Majin Buu gets ice cream, and the celebratory episode where Goku gets a suit and is late to his own party. I'm still astounded that Kai in any incarnation did include filler, as that really goes against the grain of what it sought to create. But so it goes. I do think the Japanese version was right to skip this episode, as it covers basically no source material at all. There's a few other differences as well. The final chapters, much like the original Dragon Ball Z, had Super Buu with white eyes until they transitioned over to the red eyes. In the Japanese version, he has red eyes throughout the entire broadcasted version. And in the aforementioned filler of the final chapters, there's one scene where Goku summons Shenron to erase the memories of Majin Buu to Earth's populace. That is inserted into episode 157 of the Japanese broadcast. Since the episode was removed from the Japanese broadcast and the scene is necessary for the plot, it was just crammed into the episode where Kid Buu is defeated, right before the 10-year time skip. But the fact of the matter is, this is a complete clusterfuck. In the North American Blu-rays and DVDs are present Japanese language tracks to episodes that never aired in Japan, as they were re-edited into a completely original Japanese version. The Japanese DVDs, on the other hand, only contained this very bizarre and uneven edit. It always seemed baffling to me that both of these different edits got everything so wrong. One was too fast, and one was definitely too slow. The original Kai, in my opinion, had it just right. It adapted roughly 2 episodes of Dragon Ball Z to 1 episode of Kai, and that pace worked. It wasn't too speedy, and it didn't feel like it was moving in slow motion either. But both of these are really rough to watch. I still prefer the final chapters over the original Z, because at least in North America, we could finally have a proper translation of the original scripts. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than Funimation's early 2000s dubisms and liberties taken with the original scripts. So why? Why are there 2 versions of the Kai Buu arc? What was the point of Toei re-editing 15 episodes of a re-edit? Most speculate it was due to them already having planned Dragon Ball Super, and needing a certain episode count to fill the void before Super's airing. The Buu arc wasn't actually intended to air in Japan, and it was set to be an international exclusive, but as Toriko had bombed, Toei needed something to fill in the slot before Super became a thing, and when Toei needs money, it unfortunately refers to either One Piece or Dragon Ball. To me, this seems like the most backwards, redundant, and stupid excuse Toei could have used to make its own half-assed edit of the Kai Buu arc, especially since the first few episodes of Super famously had terrible animation, so they could have aired the 69 episodes of the final chapters without making that. Look at how fast that is. I wish I could show you guys more comparisons, but I really would be stretching it with how stringent Toei is. Ultimately, the excuse boils down to inane executive meddling that made Toei more trouble in the long run. To me, that sums it all up.